Hello and welcome to this edition of EMS Now and in4ma On Tour 2022. Dieter and I have been sitting here in southern Germany all day working and thought it would be worthwhile to do a quick video discussion of the French EMS industry and the companies we visited last week. We've been doing podcasts all week. The companies we're going to discuss will have already been discussed in detail there. So our intention is not to go into a lot of detail about the particular companies, but more to speak about the French EMS market. Before I begin, I do wish to say thank you to the EMS Now sponsors for this tour, who are CalcuQuote, a software solutions partner in the electronics industry, Cogiscan, the factory digitalization partners for electronics manufacturers globally, and Micronic, a global supplier of high flexibility production equipment. Let's talk about France. Dieter and I, after being in Sweden, came back and we visited with 3 EMS companies in France this past week. Those companies, in order that we met them, were Asteel Flash, Lacroix, and then All Circuits. By the way, there will be profiles on all the companies we have toured here in Europe this time that will be placed on the EMS Now website, probably in December once I get back and get them all organized. And as I said previously, there are podcasts discussing those 3 companies already available on EMS Now, so I encourage you to have a listen to those. But let's talk more big picture about France. Dieter, good to see you, my friend. We visited 3 EMS in France. According to your number, there are 403 EMS in France. I'm going to pull up one of your data slides and then maybe get you to talk to the industry in France and kind of the sizing and how that's set up. There we go. I believe that slide is now up on the site. Why don't you kind of comment about this industry here in France?
Well, first of all, when I started analyzing the French market about 4 years ago, I got some help from a French association called SNESE. And SNESE, still as of now, is posting that there are more than 500 EMS companies in France. And I don't want to make too many statements about it, but if you just look at the chart, you see there is 51% of EMS companies which have less than 2 million in revenues, which is a huge number, and you don't see that in any other country. And I only have 403 EMS companies with 431 legal entities and about 450 facilities. Now, the French association with the more than 500 includes companies which have either less than 100,000 euros in annual revenue, or they do not have a homepage, which makes it impossible for me to cross-check whether they are a real EMS company or whether there is just somebody sitting with a soldering iron at home in his living room and doing some PCBA repair. So that is a unique situation. On the other hand, the big ones, you see that 15% of EMS companies have 73% of the French production. And if you look at it, it's just 2 companies which do more than 100 million in revenues. And again, let me clearly say, this is only French production value. If we look at some of the smaller companies on this chart, there are in actual fact companies among them which have a total revenue of more than 300 million, but that is not manufactured in France. So we know as well that about 17 companies in France, EMS companies, do have subsidiaries in Tunisia. and transfer a lot of their production to Tunisia, which is to them definitely an alternative to Eastern Europe. But as well, we know that, for example, Eolan, for example, has a big factory in Estonia. Lacroix has a big factory in Poland. And they are transferring business over there as well. Now, what you see on the chart is just French
Yeah.
revenues.
Hey, Dieter, and how much of the overall European EMS industry does France represent?
France represents about 7.8% of the European revenues for 2021. You know, I have no crystal ball, and I cannot now already predict the 2022 results. I look at the past, which is 3.35 billion euros in 2021. And with this number, they have not reached back to the 2019 revenues as of now. And that is a typical thing we see in many countries in Europe, that many companies have not been able to get back to the 2019 revenues as of now.
Fair enough. And another data point is that these EMS in France tend to have a long history of doing this work, right? They've been around many years. Now, obviously, there's exceptions, but didn't you have a number about kind of average life of these companies?
Well, their lives, and I have all of that in my data bank, on average is more than 35 years.
Wow.
But we have to realize there have been companies in the past which used to be OEM companies in the past, and then were converted. And just to mention two companies, B-Link is one who used to be an OEM company, and then I think it was a management buyout, and it became an EMS company. The other one is quite some interesting company, Cordon Electronics, which used to be the repair factory of Sony until I think 2009. And then Sony didn't want that business anymore. And Serge Cordon, I think he was a manager of the company, bought the business. And since then, he has had quite some big track record in building up a lot of repairs, but he was as well a pure EMS company. And by the way, in my definition, repair is after sales service and thus part of the EMS business.
Yeah, no, for sure it is. Now, tell me, I want to be careful. We only saw 3 of 403 on our tour. So we have to be careful not to generalize what we saw as representing
Yes.
the overall industry. One of the example of that is we saw some very, very highly automated facilities in France. That may not be indicative of the people you referred to who are sitting at home with a soldering iron in their kitchen, doing a repair or something. So, but speak maybe to the industry sectors that the French industry tends to serve mostly.
Yes. Well, number one, France is somehow competing against the UK in the sector of airspace and defense. France has a huge sector, and whereas, for example, we in Germany have a defense sector as well, but the likelihood of such orders going out to the EMS industry at the moment is very small, whereas in France and in the UK, a lot of that is subcontracted, and in France, actually 24% of the EMS business is airspace and defense. So that might as well, in part, be due to Airbus, which is located down in Toulouse area. But again, the defense area has always been a very strong area for France. And the second biggest, with 22.4%, is the automotive industry, which is of a similar size percentage-wise than Germany. I even think the French and the German EMS industry involved in automotive industry are competing to a certain extent. And if we look at recent changes, you might have read it. It was, I think, already last year when the German automotive supplier Hella, which is very much involved in lighting system, was sold to a French company, and it waits to be seen how that affects their sourcing strategy in the future.
Mhm.
But we remember as well, we did see in some of the factories as well products that were manufactured for German automotive companies.
Yeah, no, exactly. So would you say that for the most part, the industry is doing more low to medium volume, kind of hot, medium to higher mix type manufacturing?
That is difficult to say. Even so, on the three companies we saw, that is the case. But I generally always need a minimum of 5 companies in order to make a trend judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
that's fair. That's fair. I mean, and you're right. That does reflect more the type of work that we saw. Um, one of the issues that we asked all of the people about as we went around was the impact of energy, increased energy costs that they're having on your business. And France is somewhat unique in that the vast majority of their energy is derived from nuclear. So the impact is not as severe as it has been in some of the other countries.
Yes, definitely. And I don't have the exact number, but between 70 and 80% of their power generation is nuclear. And there has always been a lot of discussions about that, whether maintenance on those plants were properly done, especially on those factories, power plants that were close to the German borders. There was always a discussion, mainly coming from the Germans. But this year, we have seen as well that a lot of those nuclear power plants were down for maintenance. And we just, while we were there, read about one power plant having a radioactive leak in the cooling systems, which they were now trying to find and repair.
Yeah, which was, I believe, attributed to delayed or repair on that particular facility or maintenance on that facility,
Yeah.
I should say.
Mm.
Okay, listen, you touched on one of the issues, and let's get into a little more. One of the things unique within France, or is most apparent with France, is the relationship with Tunisia and having manufacturing facilities down there. And I believe we were told that there's more than 20 EMS facilities down there, definitely OEMs down there, and a very nice electronic cluster. Tell us
Yes.
a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, number one is if we look at the North African states, there always has been a lot of discussion about political stability. But out of those states, Tunisia always had been the least affected, and they have built a huge electronics cluster down there. And as you mentioned, it's not just EMS companies, it's OEM companies as well. And regarding the EMS size, we are talking roughly nearly 1 billion of annual revenues which are manufactured there. And now and that is a big economic factor for Tunisia, despite the tourism industry. And there is two other advantages. Tunisia has a very good education system. They have good universities. People in Tunisia are well trained, and that is different to the mainland Europe. There is a high unemployment rate of 17.4% at the moment. And may I remind you that probably this was a reason why Zollner just announced that they were going to build a second factory over there. They already have one factory, which is not necessarily only dedicated on EMS, but the second one will be purely EMS. And Now, for the French, the advantage for sure is there is a daily ferry going from Tunisia, from Tunis to Marseille. And I heard as well, even so I don't know the details, but there seems to be not an issue in regards to taxes and in regards to customs. Yeah, it seems to run very, very easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
and looking at the other states, Morocco has some factories as well. For example, Eolan, the second biggest
Mhm.
French manufacturer, has two factories in Morocco as well. So it's
So
quite an interesting area.
yeah, would you say then that Tunisia is emerging in competition to Eastern Europe for the low cost?
Definitely, because if we look at some of the Eastern European countries, specifically Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, they have a very low unemployment rate, and companies over there already now have difficulties to find more operators. And at the same time, if there is no competition, it normally causes the labor rates to go up, and that is what is happening. And even so, two of the three I mentioned do not work in the euro, but work in their own currency. They do have some possibility to influence the exchange rates and make sure their export rates are not being hurt due to this. But definitely Tunisia, for the French, and that is the other big issue, everybody in Tunisia speaks French. So it's a brilliant thing. Whereas
Yeah.
if, for example, a German going to Romania or Bulgaria, it's a different issue.
Yeah. And again, we had one data point kind of referencing the labor cost differential between France and Tunisia. One person had cited that it was 20% of the labor cost was 20% of the French labor cost.
Yes.
So that certainly speaks to a certain, if you're wanting to play that labor arbitrage game, that there's certainly an advantage there. But again, a lot of the French companies are also investing in automation. So we see an uptick in that. I noticed on your slide, you also said there's a huge consolidation potential in France.
Yes.
I think the general outlook for the French EMS industry is that they expect growth. They expect consolidation to happen. 400 plus, 403 companies is a lot of EMS companies. Um,
Yes.
and a lot of the big French OEMs have embraced outsourcing or are doing so on an increased basis.
Yeah, and let me give you another example in regards to the consolidation. Uh, there is Altrix Electronics, who was now renamed to Alliance Electronics. They had factories in Portugal and Tunisia and in the Alsace. They have now started a big M&A program, and 4 weeks ago they bought a company in Belgium, a smaller one. Now they continue 2 weeks ago with buying two more companies in France. And to the best of my knowledge, they are in the due diligence process at the moment to buy another one. And their aim is to become the biggest French EMS company for low volume and high mix products. So we'll have to watch that closely and see what happens in this
Yeah,
respect.
and as you had indicated, the overall revenues for the French EMS industry were still recovering from pre-COVID levels. So
Yes.
that's ongoing. Listen, you mentioned it. Might as well just add a few comments real quick as we close here about the Benelux countries and the EMS industries there. We had the opportunity to meet with um, three that we met with there as well. Sorry, I had to. They're all glommed together after a while. So we met with three there. Any comments about the general industry EMS in the Benelux area?
Yes. Number one is the fact that we have 19 companies in Belgium doing EMS, and we have 47 companies in the Netherlands. And this industry in total is a little bit more than 1 billion in revenues. And specifically the Dutch EMS companies are, or the market in the Netherlands is very much dominated by one area, which is in North Brabant, that is southern Netherlands, and it's an area around Eindhoven, where Philips always had been a very strong location, and a lot of companies sitting there today still benefit from Philips, whether it's medical, electronics, or you name it. And that is the reason why there is very strong EMS business down there in the Eindhoven area.
Yeah, you're right. And I remember one of your slides that you showed at some point over the last many days showed that real cluster around Eindhoven. It was pretty significant. So,
yes.
And of course, we were very impressed with the companies we met with there, just their capabilities. And again, their level of automation that they're achieving because labor issues, of course, are an issue in Western Europe, and automation is a way to compete. Before I close, Dieter, here, any final comments that you'd like to make on anything?
Well, 2 more to go. That's one thing. And to be honest, I'm looking forward to finishing this for this year, because it wears, it is exhausting. We have by now driven more than 4,000 kilometers, or better, I have driven.
This is true.
You sat by my side and you were taking a nap, yeah, and I was driving.
Right.
So, but I can tell you, I'm looking forward. I'm really excited to be at Electronica again. It's
Yes.
first time now after 4 years. We all gonna meet again. I know, talking with many other colleagues, we are all very excited about that. EMS Scout and in4ma does have their own booth, and you will be there as well in Hall A1, booth 555. We will be doing a lot of C-level interviews there as well. We will talk with the industry leaders, and we want to get a view of what is going to happen in 2023, because we already know that in 2022 we see a strong 2-digit growth in the EMS industry. And I think from what I read on the global side, this is not just in Europe, it's on a global scale. We seem to have the best revenue increase for many, many years. And even the distributors have just announced their third quarter results over here in Europe, and not surprisingly, they're reporting growth rates of more than 40%, on the semiconductor even 55%, and they predict their annual closing to be in the region of more than 20%, and they are preparing for the year-end parties already, as their profit levels have risen dramatically.
Yeah.
I just wonder
all good.
who's next it's at.
Right. Listen, I will say, just as we close too, being that I don't know when this interview will be published, and that we have today is Sunday and Electronica begins on Tuesday. This will undoubtedly be broadcasted, or this recording will be shared with our audience during Electronica. So if you're in the area or planning to be there, let us know. Come by the booth in Hall A1 555 and say hello. And that's it for now, Dieter. It's been a pleasure. We have 2 more EMS to visit, which will bring the grand total to 15, and it'll be close to another successful tour of EMSNOW and in4ma in Europe. So thank you again. For those of you watching, stay tuned. There's more podcasts still to come. And there will be profiles on all our EMS companies we visited, will be posted on EMS Now. And then undoubtedly there'll be an issue article written sharing a lot more data and insights on the trends that we've been noticing over here, and we'll be publishing that here probably in December. So that's it for now. Dieter, cheers. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.